Welcome to Conversations with Leaders in Luxury. I'm Greg Furman, founder and chairman of the Luxury Marketing Council, and recently appointed Dean of the Global Center for Luxury Marketing at Mercy College, who are kind enough to be producing this series of conversations. Today, I'm with Chuck Garcia, who is a managing director at Citadel Technology by introduction of Ed Weiss, the Dean of the Business School. Chuck, it's delightful to meet you. I appreciate your investing some time to talk to us and my constituents. Some 1,000 luxury brands in 40 cities worldwide, some 6,000 CEOs and CMOs. So it's great to be with you.
Oh, it's great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I think we share some Wall Street experiences. And as we were talking, tell us a little bit about your early years, what led you to doing what you're doing, and as a starter. And we'll talk about Mercy and some of the things that we share in common as interest as pertains to education as we move forward.
I'd be happy to. Well, I'm very grateful that I've had a really a great career that I could look back on. But my most formative years were in the Bloomberg organization. And I joined Bloomberg as a 190th employee and left when there were 8,000. The reason I am so grateful for that is it was a tremendous...
What year was that?
I joined in '88, I left in '02.
I was at the New York Stock Exchange from '84 through '87, and actually knew Mr. Bloomberg before his mayorship when he used to sit at his desk and probably around that exact time.
And that was a great time in history. It was a great time in the evolution of financial markets, and what a privilege and what an honor it was to be able to work under his tutelage.
Yeah, and such a smart organization.
Incredibly smart and most generous man I've ever known.
Yeah.
But that was a particularly formative time because I felt like in those I succeeded a lot, I learned a lot of lessons, but most importantly I learned about the art and the science of business from the master. You learned it from him, just being around him, being close to him, understanding how he looked at building an organization was the most important thing that I got out of it. Ultimately now, as I continue to ascend in my life and in my career, I want to be able to take those lessons that I was able to learn in so many years in so many different ways and be able to bring it into the classroom. Did
you do your degree in economics or finance or business?
I studied finance at Syracuse, and I went specifically, my parents were teachers. My father was actually a college professor. I have two older brothers that are both college professors. The passion for teaching is in our genes. However, something that I think you'll appreciate, when I was 8 years old, I saw the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. At the time that I saw that, I didn't have a clue what was going on. The only thing that I was certain of, when I grew up, I wanted to be a part of it. So I knew from the time that I was in high school, I was going to study finance. And when I went to study finance, I said, I am going to Wall Street. I was very singularly focused. However, throughout our lives, as we get older, as we get wiser, something is calling to me.
Did you do your Series 7 and broker's license?
I didn't, because it wasn't required.
Wasn't necessary.
However, what I did do, though, and I felt that this was actually did me a favor. When I got out of Syracuse, I felt, and I got into the working world, I felt there was a deficiency in my education. And what I had to do, instead of the broker licensing, I took 3 years of courses at the New York Institute of Finance. And the reason I did that is I knew I needed to improve upon what I thought was a really good education, but it didn't cover a lot of things that all of a sudden, here I was in the boardroom instead of in the classroom, and all this theory that I had learned in finance, I was finding it wasn't particularly applicable to what I needed to do in the meeting rooms. So the New York Institute of Finance was taught by practitioners who were very passionate about teaching, but these were traders and portfolio managers. That 3 years I had, which to me was somewhat remedial because I had to be able to catch up in order to figure out how I'm going to succeed.
Yeah, you had to know the context.
Right, exactly. And there were two things that I learned as I was ascending both at Bloomberg and from New York Institute of Finance. There are two things we need to emphasize to our students, and one of them is the content and the other is the communication skills. And I knew, and I had observed early on, boy, I better find a mentor because I don't know what's going on here. This world is very dynamic. Everything is changing. I need some advice. And the best advice that I had is, you may or may not be the smartest guy in the room, but one thing that everyone needs to improve upon, that everybody appreciates, is you need to be an excellent communicator. And to be a good communicator, there were two dimensions that I knew I needed to work on early on. The ability to inspire, get everybody motivated, and the ability to persuade. And the reason I say that, because we find in human nature, people are very resistant to change. Yet in the world of finance and the capital markets, it's incredibly dynamic. Companies change, the landscape changes, the technology changes. We need, in order to succeed, we're these big, massive companies that need to inspire people to understand why they should change, and then help them to understand the benefits of what it means to them.
So you were inspired to take enough education to prepare yourself. Was it your first job from that 3-year stint at Bloomberg?
No, I had started with a small technology company when I was at the Institute of Finance that ultimately led me to Bloomberg, which is where I had many years. It was very formative to me. I was also very privileged at Bloomberg. I grew up in a bilingual, bicultural home. My father was a professor of foreign languages. I spent 7 years at Bloomberg developing business in Latin America.
Great.
I was responsible for everything south of the border. So it was a very special time for me because I was able to use my language skills. I was constantly in and out of my parents' home country, which is Brazil. But you learn a lot about cultures, not just the human nature of Americans, but also about just people in general. And then also at Bloomberg, I spent the next 7 years traveling Europe and Asia. So I had a very global perspective. And yet we find that the commonalities for how we can help people to succeed, they're pretty much the same. Doesn't matter where you are. You were in China, somebody is inspiring and somebody is helping persuade.
Exactly.
And it's the same in any culture.
Yes.
What we find, though, in particular, no matter where we are in any culture, the smartest people are not always necessarily the best communicators, but the ones that people tend to follow tend to be the superior communicators. And what we want to bring into the Mercy College programs in particular is the integration of two things. The content themselves, which you want them to be prepared for when they get to Wall Street, but not so much in the theoretical context, but in a very practical context. This is what you can expect. Set the expectations and prepare them for the boardroom. The second is help them to improve the communication so that when they get to their ascent in their career, they will be much better prepared if we can help them to be superior communicators.
Well, and we both saw it to your expression of joy, wonder at the NYSE when the floor was the floor before technology made it a slightly quieter place.
Right.
And it reminded me of experience I had with one of my nephews, the oldest of my nephews, who, when he was very young, was my guest at the floor of the stock exchange, and fast forward, never forgot it.
Right.
It inspired him to become an entrepreneur, and now is my head of new business development for the Luxury Marketing Council, and created a Young Luxury Marketers Council. And though Chris doesn't have traditional formal education, which is something that we're going to figure out a way to work with Mercy on, he has the entrepreneurial chops and the common sense and the communication skills and the love of people, all of which go beyond cultures and make the world a lot smaller, to your point, and enabled by technology, which is the real underlying theme for education of one world, follow the sun, real time.
Well, I would be very excited to introduce to your nephew two gentlemen who never finished college. One of them named Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, and another named Bill Gates. And we could throw Zuckerberg in there for the mix. But in the end, look at what these people did. Their ability not to inspire and to persuade. It's a common theme. Didn't matter how much education.
And good practical street sense,
no question.
Street smarts.
It goes a long way.
So, when you look at Bloomberg and your experience there, in addition to really seeing how technology was evolving and understanding leadership and action in a way that organization mirrors better than maybe most that I've seen in my career, what other and a passion for education, which came from your family. What other takeaways from the Bloomberg experience?
Well, I think probably the best takeaway is a quote that I can attribute to Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg, when he talked about the evolution of education, first of all, he took something out of the Disney playbook. He felt that any organization had to have 3 strong pillars, and those pillars revolved around recruiting, training, and branding. We were always conscious of those 3 pillars, so we needed to figure out how are we going to train our people in our way. We wanted them to be able to sell with a certain code of conduct. The training component was important, but so was the branding, just as Disney did it. And Mike, instead of going out and advertising all over the place, he bought a radio station, he bought a television station. That was the branding that he did. But the most important thing in his finest quote is the assets of this company are the ones that come up in the elevator every morning and leave at the end of every night. And that's coming from a technologist. That is very high praise for the quality of the people and the importance for the people to be able to move the ball every day.
Well, for 19 years now, every season change into the new year, I call about 50, 60 of the CEOs, members of the Luxury Marketing Council, and I say to them, what keeps you awake at night? And every year, it's almost universally, top 1 or 2 is finding, educating, motivating, succession planning for the best and the brightest, so
Right.
people. The other, which I think is interesting to your point about education, which I think would be an interesting thing to pursue a little bit, is educating the best and brightest customer as to the price-value equation. Meaning, why does great stuff, why do great things, great experiences require, demand a premium price? And what the brands have found, that the most sophisticated consumers, whether it's financial services, hoteling, or real luxury products, they realize there's been a gap in terms of consumer understanding, and that when the ultimate buyer, the kinds of people we talked about, that 3.4 million, most of whom are working class kids, get it, price is no object.
Well, we grew up in a culture where price was not necessarily viewed as something that was an objection.
Right.
What you were doing was selling value. And for years, as Bloomberg emerged, all we ever heard in the early years, it's too expensive, you got to cut the price. And Mike continually to resist, no, we're not going to do that. What we sell, and we are exchanging one asset for another. And what we find there, and you find that in marketing parlance, sometimes you raise your price, you start selling more, because you're not talking price.
Yep.
You're communicating value.
And
once people get that, price goes away.
That's a profoundly important point, not just for luxury products and services, but I think for business in general, especially given the speed of the web.
Right.
Mr. Stanley Marcus used to call luxury the impact of the hand, meaning the best that the mind of man can imagine and the hand of man create. Mm-hmm. And if the consumer fully appreciated the craft of a Brioni suit, or pick what area of luxury you want, then they were willing to pay. But until they understood the value, then price became the object, and that was really not the discussion.
Agreed, and I think those are lessons that can apply not just to luxury marketing, but I think anything that we do, if we are passionate about the value that we're selling, it could be an automobile, it could be a house, it could be a handbag, it doesn't matter, it cuts across all of those lines.
Talk briefly about your role as managing director at Citadel Technology, what you're doing there, just so people have a background against which to, in addition to the Bloomberg experience.
I'd be happy to. Well, Citadel is one of the world's largest hedge funds, also known as an alternative investment manager. It developed over the years its own technology that the portfolio managers and the traders use to make investment decisions every single day in this very big, broad capital market. Mm-hmm. My responsibility is the sales of this technology, where Citadel was able to commercialize this technology that they developed for themselves and then able to sell it to other like-minded hedge fund managers.
And is it a global focus for you?
When you speak about the capital markets, it's just inherent is that it is worldwide.
Do you spend a lot of time on the road?
We do. I do. We have customers all over the world and all of the continents. Mm-hmm. And just as in Bloomberg, where I spend all of my time around the world, if you are in this business, you are married to an airplane. I know the American Airlines people really well because they see me all the time.
Right. You may be one of the unusual Americans that's multilingual. What languages do you speak?
Well, I grew up speaking Portuguese. My father was a professor of foreign languages. My parents were born in Brazil and moved to the United States a year before I was born. He was a professor of Portuguese at the United States Military Academy in West Point. So I grew up bicultural, bilingual. I learned Spanish along the way, which really helps beyond the borders of Brazil. But it was also, I grew up in a military post. So I was exposed to a college town with a bunch of cadets, and I grew up in the Vietnam era. So I had a civilian household, a very scholarly household, where I grew up with a passion for education.
Right.
But when I stepped out of my house, I stepped onto a military environment where it was yes sir, no excuse sir, sir I don't understand, embedded in my brain.
Right.
But it was really great to be exposed to those kinds of cultures because it helped me to be able to make a choice as I grew up. What did I want to do? And I followed the pursuit of finance.
It's good to be a citizen of the world these days.
It certainly is. It really helps.
So how did the magic connection between you and Mr. Weiss transpire and the Pied Piper turn on his charm? And I say that with great affection because I think his passion for revolutionizing education and for revisiting the assumptions of education to take it out of its academic context and take it into a real world context, I also think is the future. So how did that come about?
Several years ago, I knew that at some point I had made up my mind that I am going to switch careers and I'm going to be a full-time college professor. That was in my heart. I reached out to a variety of different colleges and universities in New York, and when I met Ed, it was obvious we were kindred spirits.
Right.
He grew up in the investment banking world, and I grew up in the investment management world, but as we were relating each other's experiences, we had one very common theme. So much of the theory that we had learned as finance majors, whether at the undergraduate or graduate level, we felt was not applicable to what we were doing in our everyday life. And in this vocation, in this calling that I have, one of the things I communicated, I want to be able, for those 18 to 22-year-olds who are spending a fortune in college, and to their parents who are fully committed to their education, I want to take the lessons that I learned and figure out how to reform it and how to improve it. And we were very, very similar in that, wow, it was a click.
Right.
We're thinking
I had
alike.
a similar experience, of course.
Right, and that when it led me to, I am fully committed. If Dean Weiss is leading with that sentiment, put me on that hill. I am going to follow, because I am feeling exactly the same way. Also, what was very common is we exchanged the attributes we felt that we needed to communicate that you can be successful in this business to do this. In our college experiences, it was a lot of theory, but nobody told us what to do. Nobody showed us the way. We didn't know how. We just showed up at a job saying, all right, what do I do now? We can do better. And I think the colleges have to be committed to help us, especially in 08, the world changed. Everyone is so much more
think of, I have never seen a point in my career when the boomers and millennials are pressing down on the recent best and brightest grads.
No question.
And where practical education, an entree to business as part of the education, is the given as opposed to the exception.
Oh, agreed.
You know, I come from an English and philosophy background, so what did I learn? I could write and I could think, but I had only one experience in my undergrad where a professor of mine that was a feature writer for the New Yorker magazine, one of the great writers and mentors, which is another theme I want to touch on, brought a couple of people in, a speechwriter from Exxon, and it was my last year in school, and I was grading papers for him because he knew I was working 3 jobs, so that was one of them. Took pity on me, and he said, the guy can write, so I'm going to help him. They brought in a guy from Exxon who was the speechwriter to the chairman, and it was the first time that I had ever had the concept that you could make money as a writer and a thinker and an analyst in business. And it was kind of analogous to your experience at the stock exchange, where all of a sudden the curtain parted and I had a whole nother sense of what I loved and could do, and realized it had practical application that could actually lead to making some money.
Well, I think that could cut across to any discipline that you choose, any passion that you have, if you follow that. But what we know is we need to help people to understand the practical realities, because I don't believe that was taught when I was there.
No, and it's still not. Some of the engineering schools do it and provide sequential intern programs with study with intern programs, and for another 6 months you've had experience of, in one of my nephew's cases, provincial environmental consulting, federal environmental consulting, for-profit consulting, government body, and by the time they get out they know what's being done. They have a perspective. That rarely exists, and one of the beauties of what's happening at Mercy College is that the mentorship aspect of it, in addition to the passion for education, but the mentorship and the practical aspects of it is, to your point about mentorship, is something that, without knowing you well, I know is a big part of what you love to do.
Well, that's what speaks to the heart, and this is at the point where we can be their teachers. We're not their parents. We're not there to be their parents. But the parents are counting on us with a great responsibility. We are educating their children. I think the education, though, has to be reformed and expanded to help them to understand when your child gets out of college. They talked about it in the campaign for president. Jobs, jobs, jobs. I know. I have 2 kids in college and one that just graduated. I had to think about what are they going to do after this massive investment.
What's the one that just graduated doing?
He's a musician. He graduated from the University of Colorado.
Classic or
jazz?
Jazz,
guitar. And I have a daughter at University of Pennsylvania, a son at University of Vermont. All of them, my daughter at Penn is about to get out of school. She's got to figure out what to do.
Studying business? Or?
No, studying linguistics.
Okay.
It's in the genes.
In the genes,
But I come at this now, at this point in my life, from the perspective is I understand, I empathize with the parents who are going through this, and I feel that we have a grave responsibility to be able to help them to attain their dreams. But they need help in a different way. I'm not suggesting we throw the baby out with the bathwater. What I'm saying is we can expand on it, and we can bring the practical realities of finance or business and communications, which cuts across all disciplines, to be able to bring that into the classroom.
The course that I was involved in at NYU was really interesting. I met the students through a luxury club. And they called and they said, can we come to some of your events? I said, sure. Business dress, they show up. Can we bring some other people? They show up. Then they say, oh, can we bring the associate dean? He shows up. And he says, how would you like to create the first credited graduate school course on luxury marketing? I said, great. And I was half joking. I said, by the time you get back to your offices, because I knew he had a lunch, it was a late breakfast kind of meeting, I said, I'll have the syllabus. And the syllabus was very simple, which I know you will appreciate, which is very much along the lines of Mercy, and I think that's how I came to them, which was 6 weeks, 3 hours a night, bring 18 CEOs and CMOs from every segment of retail, publishing, consulting, travel, distilled spirits, hoteling, and they get to see the real cats.
Yeah.
As opposed to a professor wagging a finger at them and doing grades.
Right.
And the thing was a huge hit for the very reason that academia too often doesn't show the student population the real people. And I think that's one of the things that we, without sounding presumptuous, that we love about what Mercy is doing.
Oh, I love it. When you look at the other adjuncts, many of them have pedigrees similar to mine,
Yes.
but at different disciplines.
Yeah, it's a great mix.
So we're broadening the different kinds of expertise we can bring in, but you can bet that in order to succeed, all of us probably had very similar traits that help us to get there. We bring those traits to the class.
So what's the focus of your course here?
My course will be very much targeted to sales and marketing because it's what I've always done. And sales and marketing is about inspiring and persuading to change. So whether it's sales, the fundamentals, sales management, and then speech communications.
And undergrad and grad, both?
To the extent it's we're still talking about what the possibilities are, but I think it has to.
That's the direction it's going.
That's the direction it's going, and it really has to do with the integration of sales, marketing, and communications.
Well, integration is the key, no? I mean,
question.
and the future.
That's right.
Because all the well, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but all the disciplines, especially in the luxury arena, typically marketing was do a lot of advertising and hold a bunch of sexy special events. That's it. That was marketing. And the population within luxury were merchants who had been promoted to marketing positions who didn't know the difference between marketing and PR.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
So now I think that within luxury there's a revolution, and the whole idea of fully integrated marketing communications along exactly the lines that you're talking about is the future of an industry group that was so flush in the best times that now they understand they have to have a much greater level of discipline along the lines that you'll be teaching.
Well, and I think that discipline, in spite of the world that we're all infatuated with a tremendous amount of technology, there is social media, there's social marketing, I think we need to stay very fundamental to we are human beings. As human beings, we feel first and then we think. We have to be able to figure out how to reach people the way they feel, meet them where they are.
So right.
There's only so much technology, so many things you can do on a handheld. That's what sales has to be. And when you're selling a luxury brand, it tends to be a very personal thing.
It sure does.
No matter what the definition is of luxury, you have to appeal to somebody's sense. And when people buy, whether they're buying luxury or anything else, people buy on emotion. They buy on passion, and they support it with facts. And I think sometimes the world thinks that it's the opposite way.
That's the old way. It's not the way. And I think not just luxury, but the business community is moving away from a military command and control, top down, people on the line do what we say and don't bother us, to people on the line are percolating trends and customer sentiments up to the top to enable the decision makers to think more creatively about how to move the business. And to your other point, I just got back from the International Herald Tribes Luxury Summit in Rome, and then recently Beijing, where 21st Century Media had a major summit on corporate philanthropy, corporate citizenship. And what was the big theme, to your precise point? Heart over head. If we operate first from a human connection standpoint, business will be done better. If the brands are sensitive to and encompass passion and the heart of the consumer, pull from them rather than push at them, that's the world we're living in now.
Winning the battle for hearts and minds comes at a very personal level,
exactly.
Not technological.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a great note on which to kind of taper off on the interview. But before we do that, I think that's a great note, and I think that's one of the things that we both will bring to this university, and it's going to be fun to work together.
Yeah, for sure.
So I always ask, what do you do to chill out? What do you do from a balance standpoint, and you've already told me, so I know it's climbing.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that first and you said distance running as well, right?
That's right. Well, I knew in my life, as my career ascended, that in what I preach and practice to my children is find the balance. And in my life, I had to decide on three things. We think in the rule of threes, ABC, 1, 2, 3. Three things. Mm-hmm. My career,
right.
My family first,
yes.
my career second, yes. And then what do I do for myself?
Yes.
I'm a real health nut. I became a distance runner in my 20s, ran marathons, run dozens of half marathons, but I knew in my 40s, I grew up with a lot of winter sports, I wanted to be a mountain climber. And I am privileged to have climbed on 4 continents.
Really?
And I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, the Matterhorn in Switzerland, lots of different places. But what I love about mountain climbing, in addition to the sense of adventure, it is very similar to the way we think about business. There's a few things you have in common. 1, there's a goal. 2, you're going to do it a step at a time. And 3, you know you can't do it alone. Every success you have, whether it's a summit of a mountain or a career accomplishment, you've done with a variety of people.
And you better be in the moment when you're 1,000 feet above the ground.
Well, what's really great about that, it forces you to adapt.
Yes.
No matter what the weather forecast is, and this is the way business is, it's a continuous lineage of move, counter-move, point and counterpoint. You hit a storm, what are you going to do? You hit a crevasse. No one said the crevasse was there, it wasn't on the map. Mm-hmm. This is the way business is, and there are a lot of parallels that I'm able to talk about that. So I tend to speak in mountain climbing analogies and war analogies.
What have been a couple of your favorite climbs?
Well, Kilimanjaro was without a doubt my favorite, but I climbed this past May in Alaska in a mountain called Mount Bona, which was literally defines the middle of nowhere. It's in a national park in Alaska, of which 50%
near Denali, or
it's east of Denali, in a very remote location. You had to take a little glacier plane in order to land on the glacier 10,000 feet up above nowhere. And then we took several days to ascend.
And camp on the...
We were on the mountain for 12 days. But that mountain climb hitting that summit is no different than the career accomplishment. But there's one very important truism. You're only halfway there. You have a long way to go, and you got to get yourself back down.
Right. Don't forget the return.
Don't forget to come back, because that's where the danger lurks more downward than it does upward. But again, you're in a world where it's step by step. What is the environment? Constantly checking to see what's the temperature. How are you feeling? Good days, bad days. That's what we do 5 days a week. So I love the
at how do I say, a heightened, pun intended, level of risk.
No question.
You know, I mean, this is not a walk in the park. This is where body and soul could be at stake.
It's body and soul, that everything has to work in tandem, and I'm just grateful to be able to have done that.
Is your home in the city? Will you be teaching in Manhattan or teaching up at Dobbs Ferry?
I live in Westchester, so it's certainly be in Dobbs Ferry, but I've been coming into the city I lived in the city for years, but I've been coming into the city for years, so it doesn't matter. Right? Look, we all know, particularly you've been to Beijing and Rome, distance is dead. It doesn't matter. You just got to get to wherever you need to get.
Well, listen, it's been a treat spending a little time with you. I look forward to having you attend some of our events and meeting some of the members of the Luxury Marketing Council, and to teaching together and doing some dreaming and scheming and imagineering to take Mercy to another level. And it's been a great privilege to spend some time with you.
Well, thank you, and I feel the same way. I'm excited about the future, what we can all do together, and I thank you very much for having me.
Likewise. And thank you all for joining us at Conversations with Leaders in Luxury, for the investment of your time and the luxury of your company. Today with Chuck Garcia, Managing Director at Citadel Technology, Adjunct Professor and soon co-conspirator on bringing the real world and practical information to students at Mercy College, which is going to be a great opportunity. So appreciate your joining us, and Mercy College for doing the production of this segment of Conversations with Leaders in Luxury.